Correspondents' dinner. One, it's completely irrelevant now, which makes my heart gleeful in a strange way. And two, they also give awards. And the award for excellence in presidential news coverage by a visual journalist, in other words, Photo of the Year, was also given out. Now, just to lay this out, the award recognizes a video or photojournalist for uniquely covering the presidency from a journalistic standpoint, either at the White House or in the field. Now, the award was presented at the White House Correspondents' Dinner on Saturday, and the winner was this photo. Actually, wait, no, that would make sense that if it was that photo, because clearly that's one of the most iconic photos, not even taken in the United States, but maybe through the course of mankind. President Trump, having just gotten shot, telling the American people we need to continue fighting, fist in the air, blood streaming down his face, the American flag in the background, did not win. Actually, what won was this photo of President Biden somberly walking away from a press conference. The judges from this award said a somber President Joe Biden, then wrestling with historic challenges from international crises and domestic calls for him to end his re-election campaign, yada, 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 yada. That wasn't the winner. The President Trump photo wasn't the winner. This was, which is only interesting because, well, maybe people might say, well, President Trump wasn't the president at that time, so maybe he wasn't eligible for this particular award, or at least a photo of him wasn't eligible. But here's the thing. It was, because an honorable mention went to a journalist from France, and that was this picture. Okay, so this was an honorable mention that the White House press corps said was better, again, than that first photo. All of this is to say this very, I don't know, ubiquitous saying nowadays on the right: you can't hate the media enough. Now, in my corner of commentary, I think I'd like to laugh at the media, and I don't want to laugh. I can't laugh at the media enough because what they're picking and choosing for photos of the year in excellence in photojournalism is ridiculous. Here to comment on that and so much more is LA County Central Committee member Elizabeth Bark-Ohana and a RAV host of Viral and Verified, Anthony Romandini, also known as Conservative Ant. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Of course. Thank you for having us.
Elizabeth, I want to start with you here. Okay, maybe in trying to be so accessible, the White House correspondents left this decision up to the blind. Is that what's going on here? How in the world did President Trump's iconic photo not even get an honorable mention? The honorable mention was Elon Musk jumping, which is funny, but I don't know if that should be in the running.
They write the jokes themselves. I mean, as iconic as so many photos of President Trump, have been during the first 100 days of his presidency, or the first 4 years of his first term, or during the campaign, this photo of Joe Biden walking away from the podium is also emblematic of his own presidency, when he wouldn't answer questions from the press. He would mumble and walk away, wander away from the crowd all the time. He was the most inaccessible president that I remember in my lifetime. And the fact that it's somber in black and white is and the energy that you see there from President Trump, and the vibrancy of both of those photos in juxtaposition of one another is a perfect contrast of what their presidencies were. Joe Biden was half dead for 4 years, and President Trump is revitalizing the nation.
That actually that's a pretty good point, especially when you consider maybe the fact is that they understand that, well, the fact that they tried to cover up this side of President Biden is the reason why they lost. Anthony, do you think they're that introspective, or are they just dumb?
Oh, they're flat out dumb. Let's not forget, guys, when that photo was all over the internet, there were actually, I think Meta might have done it, but TikTok for sure was banning people's videos or banning their profile pictures because they had Donald Trump's fight picture in it. So we already knew where that was going. A picture of Joe Biden going to the bathroom for me is absolutely symbolic of his entire presidency. I mean, he's leaving, walking away, he's going to the bathroom. It is somber because he probably ran out of fish oil. So, I mean, it's funny. Like, you can't even make this stuff up anymore. The fact that they made fun of Elon Musk for jumping up and down on stage and then said that that picture was going to be, what was it, an honorable mention or a mention or something like that. Of course they would have chose that picture because they were trolling him the entire time. So, but congratulations, Joe. I'm glad that does he go to the fireplace? I mean, the bathroom's the other way, guys.
I don't know where he was heading. Wherever it was, though, was not in good form. Speaking of things that are not in good form, is Congress people, whether they're in the House or in the Senate, just getting rich off of their public service. I've always hated that term. You went into public service and somehow ended up with $100 million. Josh Hawley, senator, is trying to fight that. He introduced the Preventing Elected Leaders from Owning Securities and Investments Act. In other words, the Pelosi Act. Now, I usually, like Charlie tweeted, hate the cutesy names of all of this stuff. But in this particular instance, I think it's kind of funny. Elizabeth, we could probably do an entire podcast on whether or not this is possible to even do. But do you like the sentiment of this, that the congressional members aren't allowed to hopefully get rich off of their positions?
It makes no sense that people like AOC, who were a bartender before becoming elected members of Congress, like, are now multimillionaires. Pelosi, also, since she became speaker, her wealth has increased by $140 million reportedly. And what's hilarious is that at first, they've been talking about doing this for a long time. And at first she resisted it because, of course, it would have affected her the most as one of the wealthiest members in Congress who has benefited from trading in securities. But she then turned around and was like, no, I support it. Let's do it. And then they just pretended like they were going to do it. So now that the Republicans are in charge, let's see if they really go through with it.
Yeah, I think that you kind of hit on one of the biggest things that is I guess the point of contention here is, can they actually do it? I'm not personally a big fan of enacting laws that you can't enforce. Anthony, do you think there's a way to enforce this? Because if I were Nancy Pelosi, I'd be like, yeah, I'm totally in favor of this. Hey, Paul, you should trade these stocks. It's not technically me, but it's my husband. Is it enforceable? Is it feasible? Or is it really just kind of like hey, this is what the American people want to see, and maybe they'll not trade, I guess?
Yeah, I think that's really all it is. It's just a way for the American people to kind of, say, nah, I'm not doing that. I love that we troll Nancy Pelosi, though. This is a really privileged class. Her and AOC and all their cronies. Don't forget, guys, we'll never forget when we were locked in our homes while Nancy Pelosi was wasted off of martinis and getting her hair done. But you couldn't go to a funeral, you couldn't go to a wedding. So these are the people that we're dealing with. And I'm all for the trolling on Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, if that's all it is, I'm still cool with it. Elizabeth and Anthony will be back after the break to talk about what went wrong in Canada and who might be to blame. Also, we'll check in with Monica Page, Turning Point's White House correspondent, right after the break. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this. back to Turning Point tonight, where together we are charting the course of America's cultural comeback. My name is Jobob. Thanks so much for sticking with us. Let's check in with Turning Point's White House correspondent Monica Page in Michigan at the President Trump First 100 Days rally. Monica, thanks for joining us. What is the White House kind of touting in President Trump's first 100 days? What are they talking about? What is the media covering? What's going on?
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, we're here in Macomb County, Michigan, a place where President Trump has won 3 times back in the previous elections and won by 13 points in the last election. So sorry about the service in here. It's kind of getting crazy. Lots of people want to come out to see the president. The White House is really touting President Trump's biggest accomplishments being the economy and immigration. Those are the top 2 big successes that the White House has really been pushing forward. We heard from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent just this morning. We heard from border czar Tom Homan just this previous week. Just breaking down the border numbers, breaking down some of the economic wins, all those jobs created, more than 300,000 jobs created since President Trump took office in January. And the wins just keep coming. We are definitely going to hear President Trump this evening, if not already, speaking about a lot of these accomplishments. And it's been very exciting here on the ground. It's very windy outside, actually, in Michigan. I was speaking to a lot of these rally goers, and their top issues that they are most excited about, and some of the wins that President Trump has already delivered on, are including immigration and the economy. A lot of the people here in Michigan are excited about the economy, especially given that this area in Michigan is huge on auto workers, factory workers. It's a big hub for both of those things, and they're very excited to see President Trump deliver on the promises that he made on the campaign trail.
Yeah, it is fascinating to look at some of the other publications. You even have it on MSNBC yesterday. There was a person that they were interviewing that had 0 buyer's remorse. Of course, that's the main thing that libs are trying to push of, oh, people regret their decision voting for President Trump. But it sounds like, especially on the ground, I'd love to hear what you're hearing from people in greater depth, if you can, about how they're feeling about this, especially considering the fact that the lib media is trying to push this narrative of, oh, people regret this decision. Is that what you're hearing on the ground?
Not at all. And I'm really glad that you brought this up, Jobob, because a lot of the people on the ground here kind of see this rally as a source of celebration. They're seeing this as a sigh of relief that there's nothing really to worry about on the ground here, because the previous rallies, you hear from the president and there's work to be done constantly. And we list off all the things that he wants to achieve and accomplish during his presidency. But here, this feels more celebratory. This is more of a, we can finally breathe. Here's what all these amazing things that we've done so far. And here's what I'm going to continue to do over the next 3.5 years. So a lot of people that I spoke to on the ground, their number one issue, immigration, constantly talking about the border, constantly talking about securing it, and the lower amount of crime that they're seeing, even in their own communities. And in the city of Detroit, for example, that's a city that has been seeing lots of crime over the last 4 years under the Biden presidency. And a lot that has to do with the economy as well. A lot of people are seeing their gas prices down maybe $1.30, $1.50. Every penny really counts, especially when you're driving throughout the city or commuting back and forth to work. This is a huge area for these workers as well. But they're happy, they're excited. Another huge issue as well is the education, keeping education safe, leaving it up to the parents, leaving it up to local communities, defunding the Department of Education, freeing the education system from woke ideology. There's a lot of families here. There's a lot of parents here of young children, and they worry about their children's education, and rightly so. So they're also very happy with the progress that's made thus far in dismantling the DOE and seeing, how these institutions are going to be defunded or freezing up their funds. So there's a lot of things to celebrate today. The mood here is very high. Everyone's very excited to hear from the president and see what else he's going to accomplish in the next 3.5 years.
Yeah, sounds like a celebratory atmosphere. I'll be looking forward to see, again, what happens in the next 100 days. It's hard to imagine. He's only been in office for 100 days with all of the stuff that's going on, a lot of the positive things the administration is doing. Monica Page, Turning Point's White House correspondent, thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.
I wonder if President Trump is able to play this celebration song, or are they one of the people that said, no, you can't play that song? I don't know. I can never figure out who is allowed to play whose music at what rally. But, speaking of elections and elections consequences, Canada had a big election yesterday. Now, we talked about it, but the exit polls were fascinating. Yes, the Conservative party did lose, and the Liberals are going to have the prime minister's office for the next several years, or at least until their next called election. But get this from the exit polling. Half of Canadian boomers, people over the age of 60, their top priority was dealing with President Trump. Now, when you ask, well, what about the price of living? Only 35% of people over 60 in Canada actually cared about that as their top priority. On the other end of it, people 18 to 29, only 15% of them cared about Trump at all. No, their main concern, overwhelmingly, half of them was, well, the price of living. In other words, it was the old liberal boomers that threw the election to the Liberals, not because of anything going on in Canada, but specifically because of President Trump. Let's bring our panel back. Elizabeth Barkohana and Anthony Raimondi join us. Elizabeth, I want to start with you. Is TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, spread so far that it is the number one priority in probably the biggest voting bloc in other countries?
It's more contagious than COVID. It's a global pandemic, TDS. And, what the Canadian election was to me is a huge warning sign for California, because we have an important election coming up in 2026. We're going to elect a new governor. And we also have a huge percentage or proportion of our electorate is over the age of 65. Most of those people are liberal women. And talk about, cut off your nose to spite your face. Like, this generation has been selling out the generations behind or ahead of them, the younger generations than them, for decades. That's just how they operate. And they're emotional voters, and they're easily manipulated. If you tell them that President Trump is coming after your Medicare and your benefits, they did the same thing in Canada. They were campaigning on President Trump is coming after us in Canada. And they believe them, even though it's the truth is exactly the opposite. So this is what happened in Canada is so stupid, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen here in California, because California politics is also so stupid.
I laugh, and at the same time, I hate the fact that I happen to live in the worst laboratory of democracy that is California. Anthony, Elizabeth brought up a good point. Is Trump derangement syndrome the next pandemic? And because of that, can the administration leverage emergency powers to do all the things we want in the same way that President Biden did in the less contagious COVID? I don't know if I could get through this. Your thoughts, Anthony, is TDS an epidemic?
100% boomers have TDS to the full. I thought it was Gen Z at first, but now the conservative party is so much more cool, and Gen Z has really come around with podcasts and comedians and all this stuff. Look, I never heard of anybody wanting to vote against something in another country when it's not beneficial to your own country. You literally voted for higher taxes, okay? You're voting for somebody that has no chance of fighting Donald Trump in your tariff war. But that's okay. We don't like Donald Trump, so we're gonna vote for a liberal party. That's just fine. All I have to say is, I don't know, DC Drano said it best today. I don't really know if I want them to be the 51st state, because they just showed us that they're willing to do this over and over and over again and just beat themselves up. I really don't want those voters here in the United States. I don't know about y'all, but I'm good.
Yeah, that's always been the when we're joking about Canada becoming the 51st state, and I think everybody recognizes that we're joking, including the Trump administration. Yeah, the only big downside is that they're going to vote poorly, and we don't want that. And so, yeah, go ahead and stay up there and, have your terrible healthcare system and all the other bad things that Canada has. Speaking of people trying to react to President Trump, Amazon, now I want to be fair about this because a lot of people on the internet are not necessarily getting this story correctly. The e-commerce giant said that Tuesday it weighed showing a tariff import photo/sticker on their website for items. In other words, you click on Amazon, you're going to buy this product, and it's going to say, haha, this actually costs this much more, and it's because of the tariffs. Now, the website themselves has said, we're not actually doing this. This was just something kicked around in a meeting. But Elizabeth, the fact that this is being even talked about in the higher circles of a company as big as Amazon and the political implications that it could have if they were to do this, I guess, what does this say about your big tech giants and Amazon in particular on whether or not they're willing to even delve into the political end with how they market their products?
Well, it goes back to the saying that personnel is policy, that the people that you have either working in your company or working in government, the perspective that they have and the decisions that they're going to make are going to have an impact on policy. And this is just one example of that, even if it didn't come from the top, even if it was just in some meeting. But this story is funny to me because I had whiplash trying to keep up with it, because you heard what happened in the White House, press briefing room where they asked the question about it. And Caroline Leavitt was like, this is hostile political action. You don't do this with any other, government policy. You didn't do this. You didn't show how much of the price was due to Biden's inflation, when he was in office. Why are you doing it now or proposing to do it now? But like by the time the press conference ended, then it was like the next news thing that came out was like, oh, actually, President Trump got on the phone with Bezos and like, this isn't happening anymore. Cancel. Yeah. So I guess it's not happening, but it goes to show like deep state actors, and similarly in the private sector, there's a lot to combat. One man can't do it all.
Yeah. Anthony, one of the big things that I saw in response to Amazon even potentially doing this was, hey, why don't they actually put a sticker up there that that incentivizes American-made products rather than saying, hey, this costs more because of the tariff? Instead, say, hey, this one is an American-made product. Is that a good idea? Do you think, obviously Amazon has a big competitor in Walmart Plus. Do you think Walmart's going to go, hey, yeah, we'll happily promote made in America products?
Yeah, I think Trump just had a conversation with Walmart today. So they're looking to move forward with stuff like this as well. Look, it's simple. People that work at Amazon, a lot of them hate America. I know that I've ordered some MAGA stuff through Amazon before, and my hat came crushed. I'm sure somebody was super angry that I ordered it. And at the distribution center, they probably beat it up before they put it in the box. So it would be nice to actually support our country, America first. But, a lot of these people hate America so much. I think that we should switch. We should bring the patriotic Canadians here, and then we can switch them with the liberals and send them to Canada, or maybe another trip to space with Katy Perry would be great.
Anthony Raimondi, let's deport Canadians to space because we don't want them at the 51st state. I don't necessarily disagree. Elizabeth Barkohana, Anthony Raimondi, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Coming up here on Turning Point tonight, we've got an awesome clip from Alex Clark's Culture Apothecary podcast. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this.
why is it crucial when you're discussing sexuality and gender to understand who God intended marriage to be for?
Because if we go all the way back to the first verse of the first chapter of the first book of the Bible, that God created the heavens and the earth, maybe the most controversial verse in the Bible because of all of its implications. Because if God is the authority over all things, or if he's the creator over all things, rather, then he is the authority over them. If he created us, he gets to say what we are, who we are. And thankfully, he answers so many of our so-called culture war questions in that one verse, Genesis 1:27. He made us in his image. That means we matter from the point that we're humans, conception onward. It means that we are made male and female, because that's what that verse says. And then he brings us together in a marriage. So he's defined gender, marriage, the value of life, all in one verse. And then he tells us to be fruitful and multiply. That is the nature of marriage. And it's not a coincidence that in Ephesians 5, Paul says that wives are to submit to our husbands. Husbands are to love their wives as Christ loved the church, because we are a reflection of the bride of Christ as women, as wives, and they're the reflection of Christ, the Savior, the bridegroom. Two men can't do that. Two women can't do that.
But what would you say to somebody who says, okay, Allie, but there are children growing up with moms and dads who are in an incredibly toxic environment, and there are kids growing up with, two gay parents that love them, and it's great?
I would say, obviously, the ideal situation is that a child is with a mom and a dad that love them very much. Their biological mom and dad that love them very much. That is the ideal. We live in a fallen world, so we don't always get the ideal. Adoption redeems a broken situation, but it is still not the ideal. The ideal is for that married biological mom and dad. And Brad Wilcox, a professor at the University of Virginia, has debunked through data what's called the family diversity theory, which we hear a lot, which is that kids just need love. It doesn't matter if it's two men, two women, one man, a polycule situation. As long as they're loved and their material needs are met, they're fine. That's just not true. Kids want to know, people want to know whose they are, where they come from, and knowing the DNA of both parents, the family history of both parents really matters to us, because the law of God is written on our hearts. We want to know whose we are and why we're here. And parents give us a beautiful window into that. So, of course, I don't want any child to be mistreated, but just because I don't want children to be mistreated, that doesn't mean that I am okay with raising purposely motherless or fatherless kids.
You wrote in the book that in 2018, you speaking out in opposition to Lauren Daigle celebrating same-sex marriage really taught you to be fearless when offering clarity on controversial subjects. Dave Rubin, a few years later, a friend of all of ours, decided to have 2 children with his husband via surrogacy. Was that another moment where toxic empathy was a tempting route for you?
Well, I will say for Lauren Daigle, she did not celebrate same-sex marriage. She was asked about what the Bible says about homosexuality, and she said she didn't know because a lot of people that she loves are gay. And so she was wrong on that. I don't know if she has corrected herself since then. I think that she's really talented and brings a lot to the table there, but that was my first time speaking out about this. And that's why I think when I came up with that alliteration that I already explained, because the Bible really does make this so clear. And I was initially scared to talk about it
with Lauren.
Yes, I was nervous, but I think it was like also around June, and I was getting a lot of messages from people being like, "Can you please talk about this?" Or "My church doesn't talk about this," or "What do you think about the United Church or my United Methodist Church split over LGBTQ issues?" And so I was like, okay, I feel like I just need to lay this out there. But I was nervous. I had been asked to speak on a panel about the definition of marriage just like a few weeks earlier. And I was thanking God that there was a scheduling conflict, because I was so scared to just be outright about it, which is almost silly to think about now. And that's just a lesson for people. Like, once you say the thing that is true, it gets easier and easier every time. But yeah, Dave Rubin, I was nervous before that interview where I, told him what I thought as a Christian, and he's a great interviewer. He was very respectful. Since I've been more outspoken against surrogacy, though, yeah, there's some added tension there.
has he said something to you like, hey, I don't appreciate this, or just like he just doesn't talk to you, period?
Well, we don't talk, but I won't disclose, private communication. I probably wouldn't like it if someone did that to me. I don't know whether he would pay me that respect, but I won't disclose the private communication, but I will say we don't have the same friendly relationship that we did. But I still think that, he's such a talented person. He is, I would say, one of the very best interviewers that I have ever been interviewed by, especially as someone who even before he had kids, I'm telling him something very personal that I disagree with. And he handled that, in a very, very classy and graceful way. And so I'll say that about Dave, and I wish him the best.
One thing that I did not know about you that you'd written in the book, and I was actually very surprised by, is you admit that there was a time where you were like, okay, I'm personally against gay marriage, but I still feel like it should be legal. And then you changed your mind. So my question is, what toxic empathy pitfalls have you fallen into at some point as a Christian and then later changed your mind on?
Yeah, there's been a lot. I would say there's one in every chapter. In abortion, I used to be for the exceptions. I thought that was a completely acceptable pro-life position to be against abortion, except, of course, in cases of rape and incest and serious fetal anomalies and, the life of the mother. I really hadn't thought through those things. I just thought that sounded very obvious and compassionate and balanced. And I remember I said that this was probably 16, 17. I posted something along those lines on Facebook, and I don't remember who it was. It wasn't a public figure. I think it was just a random commenter said, what's the difference in a baby that's conceived in rape and a baby that's not conceived in rape? And that showed me that I really wasn't looking at abortion through the perspective of the victim of abortion, which is the baby. I really was still thinking, killing babies is wrong most of the time, but in some cases it's not, which completely undermines the whole pro-life premise which is that babies in the womb from the point of conception matter, that they are entitled to rights, that they have dignity. Why would I execute the death penalty on a baby because of how he was conceived? It didn't make any sense. So I've since changed my position and also just educated myself through talking to so many pro-life doctors that there's really no reason to kill a baby to save the mother. If the mother needs, for example, chemotherapy, she's 16 weeks pregnant, she needs it immediately or she's going to die. The humane thing to do is to deliver that baby whole, even knowing that that baby is going to tragically die, to do everything that you can to comfort that baby and to save the mother. There's no reason to poison or starve or dismember a baby to save the mom. So I really don't believe in any exceptions.
I was like flipping through the book, reading, thinking like, okay, there's going to be a big fertility chapter here. Besides LGBTQ, I think this idea telling women you have a right to be a parent is another toxic empathy lie.
Yeah.
Did you consider putting anything about surrogacy and IVF in the book?
It is in there. It's in the Love is Love chapter, but we don't do a separate chapter on fertility treatments. It's in there just because when Alex is going to write a book one day, I'm trying to convince her to write a book. So when you write a book, you're going to realize like you want to put in every argument you've ever made into every book that you write. And, you have a limit. That is hard for me. I could have made this book 3 times as long because I could have done a chapter on every subject I've ever talked about. So I had to find a way to sneak it in there. And so I did it in the Love is Love chapter. And we do a little bit also just talk about fertility treatments in general, even though we're talking about it in the context of motherless and fatherless kids. But yes, this idea that your desire to be a mom, because that's a good desire, and it is, that justifies any means necessary to fulfill that desire, that's wrong.
That's toxic empathy?
It's toxic empathy. And in a way, I know that this sounds so harsh, and I don't want to sound harsh because, gosh, the longing for a child is like none other. And I have true compassion and understanding for that. But it is putting yourself first. It is selfish because you are asking embryos, these helpless children, these lives that you've created to potentially sacrifice themselves for your desire to have a child.
Welcome back to Turning Point Tonight, where together we are charting the course of America's cultural comeback. My name is Jobob. Thanks so much for sticking with us. It is time for TikTok Tuesday, but before we get to that, we're going to remind you, you can email the show anytime you want, tpt@tpusa.com. You can email whether or not you agree with us or whether you're wrong. We love reading all of your emails. Some fantastic emails yesterday, one from Noreen saying she loves the show. Hey, thanks, Noreen. Really appreciate that. Molly also says loves the show and kind of going through some difficult times. We don't have time to get into all of it, but says big thank you to an Alex Clark podcast. So thanks both of you for watching the show. Again, remember, you can email anytime, tpt@tpusa.com. Also, coming up are two fantastic big Turning Point events. The Young Women's Leadership Summit is happening in June in Dallas, Texas. You can only go if you're a woman. We keep saying that just to make sure that none of you weirdos try and sneak in, pretend I'm a woman now. No, you're not. You can't go unless you're an actual woman. You can find out more information on that at tpusa.com. Also, the Student Action Summit in Tampa, Florida is happening in July. Again, more information on that at tpusa.com. Anybody can go to that one. Just the Young Women Leadership Summit is only women. You can't go if you're a man. So without further ado, it is time for TikTok Tuesday. There are some fantastic TikToks in the queue. So let's play clip number 1 here on TikTok Tuesday.
I just earned my PhD, so I'm officially a doctor of gender studies. So when I lecture people about pronouns now, I can charge them for it and call it a class.
honestly, that's actually great, dude. I'm super happy for you. Very excited that you've reached that milestone in your life. Anyway, can I get a vanilla latte with whole milk and also get a scone on the side? And I don't need the scone warmed up. I think it's fine. When you put it in the microwave, sometimes it gets all the texture gets all wonky. But really appreciate that, dude. I'm sorry. I'll try to not laugh at myself. But next clip on TikTok Tuesday is as follows.
They owe each of us $300K. So I don't care how they get the money. That's not my problem. I just want my money. A debt is owed. You owe a debt. You have to pay it.
Amen, sister. I agree. Somebody owes me $300,000. As a black woman myself, which again, I don't know if anybody knew this. I do identify that as a black woman, at least for the times in which somebody is going to pay me $300,000. So somebody owes me a lot of money, and you better pay up. And as soon as I get my money and the check clears, I will go back to being what I am. Not identify as that. Wow, we've got some interesting one. TikTok is a wild place, people. If you're not familiar with it, this is where you find all this crazy stuff on the internet, including clips like this. Go ahead and play clip 3.
So how was your date with that girl?
They're non-binary, actually.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No worries.
How was your date with they?
I don't think you get it. It's they, them.
Oh. They, them. Okay, yeah. Was them hot?
I don't think you're getting it. I don't know why. It's pretty simple.
I'm just like ESL.
Yeah,
not
that
good at
shouldn't
this
matter.
kind of stuff. Was they cool?
So now you're actually just like speaking English wrong.
Oh,
yeah.
They, them. Okay, sorry. What did you all do together?
Oh, yes, I can answer that. Perfect.
What's its name?
No.
That's actually the best thing. She said the whole time. What's its name? You know, I love the audacity there of no, now you're just speaking English wrong. Okay, well, you're using a plural to describe a singular person. There's a fantastic stand-up comedy bit. I should have found it. Maybe I'll find it sometime later on in the week or some other time where this guy says, I'm new to these pronouns. He's an immigrant. And he's like, yeah, somebody said, hey, you're coming over to my house. She says, no, not he. It's they. And he goes, oh, okay, well, they. And then they showed up, and it was one person, and he was mad because he bought all this food because he expected more people because they is a plural. And I love the audacity of, hey, no, you're saying English wrong, and therefore, no, okay, all right, we don't have to put up with your nonsense. Yeah, TikTok is such a wild place. Let's see. The last one here. This is actually quite interesting. And I talk about this a lot as a person who is suffering under the dictatorial thumb in California. As a laboratory of democracy, I say this sort of thing a lot of times, and it's fun to hear someone else echo my sentiments of living in this godforsaken hellhole that is an example of what you shouldn't do in the red state that you live in. Watch this of a guy from Portland talking about his experience.
Portland is doing an incredible service to the rest of the country. We are the place where the worst ideas are experimented on. And so we are we're the guinea pigs, we're the lab. And so our suffering is here to help make everyone else's life a little bit more flourishing. We love to say that, we're the leaders, and we are the leaders. We're leaders in what not to do, and it's very important. It's a role that we had to play. We should relish it. It's sad. I mean, we suffer through it, but it's a cross we have to bear.
It is. That's 100% true. I feel that way in California. I exist in the state of California to be an example for the rest of the country of what not to do. The people of Portland are the reason you have warning labels on don't eat this dish soap. That's exactly the reason why. And you need those types of people. And I am not happy to do it, but I am doing this service in California to look around and go, oh, this is a terrible idea and it sucks and we shouldn't do it elsewhere, so that you in your reasonably run states don't have to suffer the same consequences of bad policy where you live. That is going to do it for us here at Turning Point tonight. Thanks so much for tuning in. Charlie's going to close us out. We'll be back same time, same place tomorrow. Again, you can email the show, tpt@tpusa.com, anytime you want. See you then. God bless America.
It is 100 days of the Trump presidency, and if you are getting a little bit uneasy, oh, I wish there was more deportations. Where are the arrests? Where are this? I get it. We're here to air all those grievances. In fact, today is a day where we understand that it could be Festivus every day here on the Charlie Kirk Show. The airing of grievances. But what I will not tolerate is whining, complaining. Because all we have to do is look to the north. All we have to do is to look to our neighbor to say, you know what? We have it pretty good here. We have it pretty awesome. We have a president and administration every day that is fighting for the American people, and they're getting things together. They are reconfiguring the U.S. government to represent our country because, boy, what happened last night in Canada is awfully depressing. We're going to be spending almost the entire hour talking about what's happened in Canada and contrast it with what's happening here. There's a fair amount of people that just want to try to find something wrong with President Trump's administration. Oh, we shouldn't have deported that guy. A lot of should haves, but time out, guys. Understand that we could have a Prime Minister Carney. We could have a catastrophe on our hands. Canada, being our neighbor to the north, has indulged the last 40 years in liberal government. And their decline is steep. 16 years. Huge explosion of housing prices. A incomprehensible immigration flood. Like hard to even grasp. The biggest innovation in Canada right now is they become the most famously pro-suicide country in the world. Not a joke. And interestingly, the election last night, which was the election of Mr. Carney as prime minister, the patterns of what we're seeing in Canada are eerily similar to that in America. Get this. Canadians over the age of 60 and over are by far the most likely to vote for Carney because they thought he was good at dealing with Donald Trump. For younger voters, very similar to here in America, they wanted to reduce the cost of living. So I think I could be a little bit more candid because whenever I say anything about baby boomers, I get thousands of nasty emails as if people must be defensive of their generation like I'm attacking your family. It's very bizarre to me. But how about this? Canadian baby boomers don't care about the future of Canada. Now, if I get criticism from that statement, I will shrug my shoulders and laugh. You would think the way the West was built was with a intergenerational social compact. I, at age 60, am going to sacrifice for future generations. I might not have the life that I want, but my kids will, and that will give me satisfaction. That is how you build a country. That is how civilization improves. When you have delayed gratification, it's how you leave a legacy. And we saw a window into the perverse moral nature that now dominates the West. And Canada was way worse than America, but both of our countries were terrible during the lockdowns. During the lockdowns, we saw we will sacrifice the youth to save the old mantra. Very troubling. Few people isolated this and pinpointed this. And we kind of just all believed it. Yeah, we're going to ruin our kids' lives so that we can have a better 5 years. When has that ever been the case of a Western value? That is a soft form of child sacrifice. So we're going to have young people have a worse time off. They're going to be masked. They're going to be more suicidal. They're going to be more alcohol addicted, more drug addicted, more isolated, less likely to be part of a community. But hey, at least I'm making sure that I don't get COVID, even though it wasn't nearly the threat that people thought it was. Not even close. And in Canada, we saw with the results last evening, Mr. Carney defeated the Conservative insurgency, which had a massive lead just a month and a half ago. And to be honest, President Trump's issuing of tariffs against Canada helped the Liberal Party in Canada, which, interestingly, the Conservative Party very well should have positioned themselves as a way to benefit from it. But Canadian voters said, oh, Trump is a conservative party. We want to stay liberal. The amount of people that Canada is bringing in through mass migration will destroy Canada. Canada's already basically destroyed. It's 1 million people a year. Canada is literally falling apart. Its average home price is tens of thousands of dollars higher than here in America. Even though Canada has nothing but space and lower incomes than America, it is a choice. It is a decision. They're bringing in people from all over the planet that are further disintegrating Canadian culture and values, whatever that means anymore. They have long wait for medical procedures, mass proliferation of drug usage, except, of course, if you want to be able to use suicidal drugs or suicide pods. They call it MAID, M-A-I-D, medical assistance in dying. And you look at now 100 days. 100 days of President Trump, the contrast and the difference. And you should be saying your prayers of gratitude today. Thank you, Lord, for saving us. Thank you, Lord, for giving us the grace, because Canada, we are going to be neighboring a semi-Soviet country soon. It's not an exaggeration. We have a border. We are putting the American worker first. And I've always said to reporters or people on campus, Charlie, what do you disagree with President Trump on? And I kind of jokingly but very seriously say, man, I don't want Canada as our 51st state. Why would we want this state? They're more to the left than even our most liberal state. Why would we want them as our 51st state? And now Canada is in a irreversible death spiral, held captive by environmentalism, mass migration, critical theory. It is every dynamic imaginable packaged